Hey guys, how we doing today? It's a little let 'em roll, Big John Patton right there. Fun record. I listened to it probably 3 times yesterday. And whenever you have Grant Green with an organ, you're going to church. Let's not play around with that. Like, it's not like it's got hints of the gospel. This is Sunday in Detroit, baby. You know what I mean? It's wonderful. And oftentimes I'm surprised by how people talk about some of this stuff like they don't feel the spirit in organ jazz and some of this 60s boogaloo, R&B-ish, you know what I mean, Blue Note, Prestige stuff. It's got so much spirit, so much groove, so much feel, so much blues. I mean, you almost got to put a robe on to get down with it. And so, like, once again, I think people overthink things. They want to put on their little monocle and be a professor and be like, oh, I'm so sophisticated and that's so beneath me. It's simple and it doesn't shock my senses in any way, so it can't be very jazzy. It's the pretentiousness of some of these people, to me, it's such a disservice to the art. That's the problem. And it's something I've been fighting the entire time I've done this channel, is that notion that if you're not making your friends and roommates and partners uncomfortable with what you're playing, you're not playing jazz. There's a notion that some people have that organ jazz isn't jazz. And this is as jazz as it gets. And all the roots of rock and roll, R&B, the jump blues kind of are grafted into this organ subgenre as well. And it just reeks of spirituality. It reeks of a hunger and a thirst for a promised land. It just is layered with the desperation and that need to cross over the River Jordan. And even the redemption of an end time that's going to redeem, in consequence, the injustice in the world. And I think for people who are in struggle, that's a necessary avenue. For the bourgeoisie, it can be dismissed as light-hearted affair. It was not enough depth for me, darling. And what they forget is that in struggle, simple pleasures are plenty. They're enough. And this expression and the simplistic format and the blues being enough, the expression, I mean, you've kind of lost even the bebop innovations here with this music to a degree. It's going back to the more traditional scales, more traditional soloing over the chords. But it's very connected to where rock and roll ends up. And there's a reason why there's Beatles sessions that you can hear these guys jamming with Billy Preston, and it's like, okay, I hear you, John, Paul, George, Ringo, marvelous. There's a reason why XL on Main Street brings in that soul and that spirit and that gospel. I mean, and these are hallmark rock and roll sessions, XL on Main Street, and yet they're layered with the sounds of the Black Church, Soul Survivor, Shine a Light, Loving Cup, Sweet Virginia. I mean, if you don't know XL on Main Street, it's probably the finest rock and roll record ever made. It's not overproduced. While there is some production, it's still got a real raw, gutsy, soulful, darker than Motown feel. I mean, it's dark. It's drunk. It's south of Spain, tax exiles living on the lam almost. And there's a certain degree of a party going on. But Exile on Main Street, that's professional white impression of rock and roll, rhythm and blues, jazz, black American music. And at its core, it does it as well and as beautifully and as gutsy and as soulful and with as much integrity. And these little white boys from Hackney, it was the Hackney Diamonds, a new record they did. But these British kids had their own struggles, obviously. And one of their struggles apparently was not wanting to pay taxes to the crown because they were millionaires, and as an artist in the British Empire, you get taxed pretty hard. So it's a different kind of struggle. And I mean, heroin and cocaine, alcohol, the bottle, the woman's, I mean, all those things do give you an element of struggle and pain and sorrow and anguish. But I just think it's really funny how so many people who think of themselves as jazz literates, and the real cognizati, we're the illuminated ones. They like the jazz that's leaning as close to the European tradition in terms of composition and arrangement and hints of the avant-garde. And I mean, it's like the less black it is, the more you like it. The more you think it's jazz, and the wronger you are. Boom. Let that blow up in your head for a second. The less black church it's got, the more European it becomes, the more you think it's good. You fucked up. I mean, you gotta fucking someday go, yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying, Jazz Shepherd. I do like sophisticated music with a lot of composition and difficult arrangements. And I guess that is the European tradition being grafted into this great black art form. And the more simple, but more spiritual, more gutsy, more real, more honest, more bluesy, blacker form of the jazz, I've always kind of denied as being less jazz. But you know what, Shepherd? You make a good point. It's that music that's jazz. And it's the stuff that gets grafted into it in the 60s and the 70s and the ECMs and the easy listening and the CTIs. I mean, boy, that gets kind of elevatory at times. New wagey, spacey. Ain't no black man on the moon. I mean, ain't no black man even making Space Odyssey. That's white man country. Got a customer. Anyway, it's Ken gave me a nice post the other day. Ken McCullough, good friend of mine, and of course has his own channel, Jazz Vinyl Lovers on Facebook, and he put a nice post out there, and I appreciate that, Ken, very much. We see eye to eye on a lot of things for sure. He's probably more of a pressing guy, audiophile guy than I am, obviously, but it did kind of illustrate the point again that so much of the modern vinyl community, Facebook commentary is about pressings and records and editions and reissues, and again, that stuff has its place, and I get it, and I've sat in a record store talking that stuff for hours with people over the years, but it's like it speaks to a lack of comprehension of the music itself. If you can spend 10 minutes talking about the glossy jacket and the photographs and the modern editors and reproducers of the art, and which is all great, it's all important, but the velocity of the energy on that record, why aren't you telling me that? Why aren't you telling me how intense a session is it? Is it kind of cool and breezy? Is it elevated in its spirituality? Is it dark? Is it filled with positivity and buoyancy? Is it elevating me? Is it lifting me up, helping me accomplish getting through my day? Or is it more of a militant, aggressive attack against what's oppressing me and holding me down? Jazz records all embody that stuff. This, John Patton, Yeah. I mean, it kind of says it itself, but it's about a good time. Let 'em roll. And it's about the gap between the spiritual and the sexual being so narrow as to be undefinable. And we find that throughout the history of black music and all of its white replicants. I mean, Elvis Presley pushed the boundaries of sexuality. Jazz music was from the brothel. It was an accompaniment to vice. It embodied groove, pulse, that dangerous black sexuality. That's what scares white America. The freedom to dance, to drink, to celebrate, to consume wine. That human experience, that human condition, that's why the ghost inside of us wants to come and inhabit this flesh for 75 years. You're on a 75-year flesh vacation. You go from spirit back to spirit. The body's a 75-year interruption of the pleasures of this fleshly kingdom. The ghost didn't come here to get a job and feel the stress and the tyranny of it. It came here to celebrate. And no matter what form or what body it inhabits, it wants to enjoy dance and sex and wine and food and music and be elevated and enjoy why it inhabits his body. This music is a celebration. Speaking of the blurred lines between sexuality and spirituality, few do that better than the great Leonard Cohen. I know I've spoken about him before, but again, I played this debut record of his in the cafe. I played it probably 3 days in a row. And unlike with jazz, where I'll play the record back to back to back at that moment, more of a pop rock record, that kind of lyrical song constructs like that, I might play it a couple days in a row, but I won't play it back to back. And I played this probably 3 days in a row, and what a great debut. What an interesting... First of all, the style of guitar is quite interesting, folky. It sounds kind of elaborate, but it's also kind of simple. But it's beautiful and bard-like. And it takes you back into history. Almost a medieval bard at times. A tale from Canterbury. It has mysticism and gilded temples and castles and Jewish alliteration and Catholic upbringing and all laced with this spiritual sexual crossover that clearly blurs the lines all the time. One of the great lyricists and a huge impact on one of the early kind of goth industrial scenes. When you listen to Sisters of Mercy and the band Coil out of England, and a lot of other those contemporary groups, they were borrowing. Sisters of Mercy is a Cohen song. One of their compilation records is called Some Girls Wander by Mistake, which is a lyric from a Cohen song. The band Coil does Who by Fire, which is a Cohen song. And then, of course, Cohen has some bigger hits in the 80s with everybody knows the dice are loaded, everybody rolls with their fingers. I mean, what a great song that is. And then Natural Born Killers had Waiting for the Miracle, which is one of the great orated kind of what a mood setter that song is. And he keeps making records into the early 2000s, maybe up to 2012 or 14 when he passes. And 10 new songs from like 04. What a great record that was. I mean, just a huge Leonard Cohen fan. Obviously not a jazz guy, but when you talk about the blur between the spiritual and the sexual, again, Elvis, Ray Charles, Little Richard, Duke Ellington, it's always been an omnipresent thing in black music. And here it is in a Jewish native of Montreal. Huge fan. Love his work. This record has been on twice this week, and I think I played it twice both times. Horace Silver, number 4008. These bands have been in transition at this point. And by that I mean he's kind of established his new working group. When he leaves the Messengers, he brings Mobley and Bird and Watkins with him and leaves Blakey to his own devices. And that Silver group does some great stuff, 55, 56. Those guys kind of all go their own way. Silver has a few lineups on Farmer and other people in 57, 58. He's working continuously. He's a hard-working fella, Horace Silver. Blue Note gave him a lot of freedom and a lot of license. Horace Silver's album covers, his photographs are often outside, up and around the city, which someone pointed out to me. I hadn't really realized it, but it's true. No one else really at Blue Note. Most of our studio photographs of them inside, you see him in front of the Waldorf Astoria, you see him out in the park bench. I mean, you see him in a lot of different settings that are exterior shots. Stylings of Silver. Again, it speaks that he had some pull with the A&R department and the graphic design department, which I'm sure wasn't called the graphic design department, but the art department at that point. But this is his kind of 60s working group coming into fruition here with Junior Cook, Blue Mitchell, Horace Silver, Eugene Taylor, and Louis Hayes. And that group, with various interpretations, is for the most part his core group for the next 3, 4, 5 years. And all those guys are legends of their own right. Blue Mitchell has a great career of his own. Junior Cook makes a few fine records in the session, but he's a prolific sideman. Great record, filled with a fairly intense tempo-wise and some Latin tinge stuff as well, but it's always got a bit of a softer dynamic and emotional expression than Blakey's record of the same time frame. Blakey's records are quite aggressive and quite intense and have a political undercurrent, a social undercurrent. With Silver, you get less of that. You get more of just a guy that loves music. That's what you really feel with Silver. It's like, I just love music. And you don't get the same quite political social urgency with Silver's records. More of a, again, you get the Black Church quite a lot. And that's just about that willingness to survive, that necessity. This MJQ record, it's a fun compilation, 2 10-inches, and the neat duality of Milt Jackson Quintet and Modern Jazz Quartet, both being MJQ, from 2 separate 10-inches. There's an interesting trumpet player on this who's actually quite a beautiful player, Henry Boozier. And if that's a name of some nom de plume or whatever, I'm not sure I've seen the name Henry Boozier too much, but he's really wonderful on this. He sounds a bit like Art Farmer at times, even a bit like Miles at times. I mean, I noticed him several times. I'm like, man, who's that playing the trumpet? Because you don't really hear trumpet in MJQ settings very often, and with Milt Jackson more so. You'll hear horns, but obviously MJQ was revolving around the vibes and the piano. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure, to be quite honest. And Horace Silver actually shows up on the piano on the Milt Jackson side, which is pretty fantastic. Both sessions are from 52 and 54. Great stuff, and honestly, it was a really enjoyable listen. Cool cover. You could definitely see some Reed Miles influence here on this cover, the modern design. And again, it's something that it's still modern 70 years later. Probably 1956 this came out, and here we are in 2023, and you could still see a cover with something like that happening. A record I've talked about quite a few times, but again, I pulled it out to listen to, and I enjoy it every time, is the trio on Savoy number 12053, the great Kenny Clark, the great Wendell Marshall, and the mellifluous Hank Jones. These guys were the backbone rhythm section of the Savoy label for a long time, 54, 5, 6, 7 in that era, on dozens and dozens of sessions. I think I counted Kenny Clark on almost 100 Savoy records. Hank's probably on 50, 60. Wendell Marshall's on a ton himself. But great cover, very dated. I mean, it looks like you open up the piano bench at your grandma's house as a kid, you pull out a music book, and there was this in there. It's got that 50s graphic, the tone color with the black and white photos. I mean, we can do 2 colors. Let's get modern with it. And oftentimes when you try to get modern with something, as that modernity arrives, nothing will look more dated than what's the most immediate modern thing at that moment. because it's really tough. It's really tough. Same thing with recording technology. The new gadget, the new thing, the new piece of technology that's going to be the new wave across music. It's often that signature sound or tonality or production style that will end up dating that recording. Whether it's the 808, whether it's the strings of disco. I mean, there's a lot of examples of the vocoder, the auto tune of the modern era. There's just a lot of technology that came along that you're like, oh, boom, that's linked to that time frame explicitly. And so be careful when you try to be really current, because that current effort will often be what makes you sound dated the most. Moving along, Clark Terry. Great session. This is on the Moodsville series and Moodsville number 20, which is a prestige sub-series. Clark's a wonderful player out of St. Louis. I mean, he's got some of that Art Farmer tonality, Blue Mitchell vein. Not quite. I mean, he could certainly blow hard. He certainly has a bright tone at times and can sound almost like a Lee Morgan or, I mean, a Dizzy Gillespie, but he's also got some wonderful ballad playing, balladeering. Great session. This is backed by a nice little band at Prestige. Junior Mance, Joe Benjamin, and Charlie Persiff on the drums. Fantastic quartet. I'm actually going to play that next today. Again, a record I've showed many times is this Miles Davis record, Blue Haze. Again, sessions from the early 50s called together on the LP here. It's from 3 or 4 different dates, actually, from 54, 53, and 54. And I'll remember Abel Davy Schildkraut. I've talked about many times. Yeah. This is some fantastic alto sax playing that I remember numerous times when I play this record, but alto sax would jump out at me and I'd be like, is that Parker? Who is that? And you try to think of the alto players that were around at the time, the Adderleys, the Lou Donaldsons, and nothing really seems to be like, no, that's not. And again, it's a guy named Davy Schildkraut who's really quite an obscure player, but just beautiful. And it just goes to show you, there's a lot of guys that were incredible players who never got the fame. And I'm going to show you another record that's really kind of a staple of almost any jazz collection. And any collection that is not a jazz collection might even have this in it. And of course, Dave Brubeck's Time Out. And it's something I play in the cafe frequently. A lot of guests are going to be familiar with Blue Rondo La Turk and Take 5. Of course, they're staples of every library, concert hall, and museum around the world. Brubeck is the cool. When people talk about West Coast cool, this is what it sounds like. Take 5 is as cool can ever be. I mean, as the Beastie Boys once said, cool as a cucumber in a bowl of hot sauce. Like it's cool. It's Paul Desmond's melodic phrasing is just angelic. It's just wonderful. The groove that Morello and the band plays is just solid. Brubeck's a great groove player with a lot of rhythm and blues in his sound at times. Brubeck, I think, again, takes some slag from people, and he's not the virtuoso, say, like Oscar Peterson, but he's a great arranger and composer from the piano. He just sits there and gives you the right spaces, and he knows when to give you mids, highs, lows that's going to fill the vacuous spaces in a song. Sometimes you want those high tinkling, sometimes you want those mid fulls, sometimes you want some anchor heavy lows, and he just seems to get that, those octaval shadings. Octaval shadings, is that a word? I'm not sure. I love it though. But anyway, so I mean, everyone knows it, but it does deserve mention once in a while because it is Jazz 101 to most beginners. I mean, Kinda Blue and that record are probably the 2 best-selling jazz records of the modern jazz era. So that wraps up today's episode. Hope you're all doing well out there. I got to pay the mortgage again coming up for anybody who wants to help out again. You could definitely use a few donations coming towards the end of the month here to help me pay that. My wife, as some of you probably remember from a few episodes ago, has pretty much walked out on me and the business. drugs, affairs, alcohol, depression. A lot of things that factor into this. Some of it I probably should have saw coming, but she was so my rock for so many years, 9 years, that I didn't see her falling apart. And she was gone for work so much that I was missing a lot of the pages. And so it's been a tough time for me. I miss my friend, my wife, my lover, my small talk companion. But at this point, I think there needs to be some time and healing at best, if not just a complete moving on. It's gut-wrenching, and of course it's really affected me financially as well. We're surviving, but the margins are tight. And so anybody who wants to help out this channel and help out this cafe and help out having a place for jazz heads to come and talk about this music. I mean, this place is not just a coffee shop. It's not just a place where I make a living. It's a place of solace and refuge for the community to come together and to talk about this great art form. And we're pretty centrally located in North America, right in the heart of the continent. And anybody who wants to make a trek or is crossing the country, detour and come and see me for the afternoon. Come spend a couple hours and talk about the music. And remember to take a picture of me when you do. I often forget to do that when I'm here with someone. I'm like, God, I should take pictures of that guy. But y'all be blessed. Y'all be safe. You have a great day. Fun records every day. We're going to keep sharing that stuff with you. Appreciate you all. Peace, love you. Bye.